Hi guys, so I wanted to film a video today basically where I made a list of 10 books that make me smile, that maybe make me literally laugh out loud because they're comedy, but also just like give me those warm fuzzies and might give you those warm fuzzies too, because I think this is a time when a lot of us are just looking for a bit of escapist literature that might just like put a smile on our face whilst we sort of deal with everything else that's going on in the world. Although conceptually I hope this is something that is still useful in many months and years to come. So like I said, I'm going to talk to you about 10 books that put a smile on my face, and without further ado, let's get into them. First up is The Portable Door by Tom Holt. This one immediately jumped to my mind because I've just started reading another book by Tom Holt that entirely reminded me of how much I love his sense of humour, how escapist I can find his books, and how they can pick me up in a slightly anxious and dark time. And The Portable Door is all about our main character, a young man who gets a job at a firm in London, a business firm that he doesn't really know what they do at. He gets this job because he needs a job. He doesn't really know why he's been hired, for what purpose, and what he's actually contributing to. There's a lot of mystery and secrecy at this firm, and they just sit him in a room with a pile of work to get on with, along with another new recruit, a young woman that he 100% has a crush on. Well, what is going on at this firm, I hear you ask me? It turns out it is run by a host of magical creatures, from fairies to wizards to goblins to demons. They are around every corner, and our young man has to deal with all of the strange things that start happening until he realises exactly what he's gotten himself in for. The Portable Door is a book full of humour. It's a combination of sort of contemporary fantasy and comedy, and it just does it perfectly well. I found myself literally laughing out loud as I read this book, which is something that I feel is such a precious thing to find in literature. So once you've got it, grab hold of it. And I remember reading this one at a time when I was quite stressed and under a lot of pressure, and it really just like brought a little levity to my sort of recreational reading that I very much needed. So it's one I always recommend if you're looking for a good laugh. A book I read much longer ago though, when I was a child, and I just remember being in fits of hysteric over it, was The Giggler Treatment by Roddy Doyle. Now, Roddy Doyle writes a ton of incredible literature, including comedy for both children and adults, and I would recommend his adult books as well, but there's just something so special about The Giggler Treatment. This is about a group of children, their parents, and a dog called Rover. The children have been punished by their parents, perhaps slightly unfairly, and when that happens, when children are unfairly grounded or have their pocket money taken away from them, or no dessert after dinner, along come the Gigglers. They are these small, strange little creatures that punish parents by making them stand in dog poo. That is the entire premise of this book, and it is perfect. Obviously the kind of humour that greatly appeals to children, but when I read this book, both my parents read it after me because they were fans of Roddy Doyle's adult work and just couldn't get over how much I was laughing out loud when I was reading it. I was on holiday with them, so they were like very aware of my physical reactions, and they both still found it incredibly charming and funny to read, because I think Roddy Doyle's writing is just so good that even if he's writing a children's book full of toilet humour, he still does it well, and that's something that you can't take for granted, because that might seem like an easy bet, but there is still good writing at play, and therefore I still recommend it to a lot of people. I keep meaning to go back and reread it. It's also part of a series, so if you're looking for like a good like children's series to like have a giggle over with the Gigglers, then this is the one. A more recent read, and one that's a little bit different, although I still find incredibly humorous, is The Duchess Deal by Tessa Dare. Now this is the first in a 4-part series by Tessa Dare, the 4th book in which is not out yet. It's out later this year when I'm filming this video, and I'm so excited about it, because one of the things I think is so endearing about this series is the group of friends it follows. Each book follows a new central female character and her relationship and her romance, but equally through that you see more of the bond between these 4 women, how they support one another, how they interact with one another, and it's so nice to see like a really positive depiction of like female friendship that's really strong and like tightly knit, and I really love that aspect of it, as well as of course the romance side. You don't read historical romance if you don't want the romance side, do you? So this is a Regency romance series set in the early 1900s in London, and like I mentioned, we follow 4 friends. In the first book we follow our protagonist Emma, who is a seamstress that one day storms into the study of a duke because she hasn't been paid for this wedding dress that she was hired to put together for his wedding when that fell apart, and because the wedding isn't happening, she hasn't had her money and she needs that money, and instead of offering to pay for the dress, he suggests that they instead get married. That will support her financially and he will be able to like create the heir that he wants without having to go out there and build a romantic relationship with someone. But of course they develop a romantic relationship. What begins as a business deal turns into a romance, and it has a little bit of Beauty and the Beast vibes, although they're not cut off from the rest of society, but he's definitely a recluse. So I just love this series. I love Tessa Dare's writing. Yes, it's very clear it's written by a modern author despite being in a historical setting, but I think what Tessa Dare's modern perspective brings to the table is one of the things I love about this series and this book and all the books she writes. I think it really gives the female characters an opportunity to be incredibly like fierce and strong and powerful in a time period when there was a lot more restrictions on their movement, and again sort of adds to that humour. So I really love these books. We then actually have another children's book, but one that I've read much more recently, and that is the Mysterious Howling, book 1 in the Incorrigible Children of Ashton Place series. So I've read books 1 and 2 in this series so far and adored both of them, and I cannot wait to read book 3. That's definitely a book I'm going to be reading shortly to put a smile on my face. But these books are just brilliant. These are the kind of middle grade books that any age can enjoy. They have so much to offer and they are so well written. They again have like their own unique sort of sense of humour. In this instance, the series is set in Victorian England and we follow a 15-year-old governess who's been raised at a like orphanage boarding school for girls where she's been trained up as a governess and now is off on her first position to look after 3 children. But when she gets there to take care of these 2 boys and 1 little girl of around 7, 5 and 3 years of age, she finds out they're not actually the biological children of their guardians, they're instead wards that were found in the wood having been raised by wolves. Of course they were. So they are slightly wild and out there and don't quite understand society's rules or that you shouldn't chase squirrels for dinner. But she comes in and decides that she is going to take care of them. She's going to give them some security, introduce them to the world in a kind manner, but also teach them Latin because she's not about to sacrifice that aristocratic education that she was prepared to bring to the table. Of course, it's not simply about their lessons. It's also a mystery series. We don't know exactly where these children came from, why this couple has decided to take them in, and equally there seems to be some other people that are slightly interested in who and what these children are. There's very possibly a paranormal aspect, although it hasn't become clear as of yet where I am in the series, but I think that's like the implication thus far, and it's such like a rip-roaring adventure that takes you up and down the sort of lengths and breadths of Britain in the Victorian era and will just like make you chuckle and engage with an absorbing like mysterious storyline. One that I have no doubt you expected to be on this list when you clicked on this video is of course The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams. So The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is the first in Douglas Adams' trilogy of 5. You just gotta go with it. This is a 5-book series that follows Arthur Dent, a human who hitches a ride on a Vogon constructor fleet that is about to demolish the Earth to make way for a hyperspace bypass. Yes, I know that's a lot of like long convoluted words right there, some of which are definitely not real, but he is taken along as a hitchhiker by his best friend Ford Prefect, who up until the beginning of the first book he didn't know was actually an alien, and he's now flung into outer space, having lived quite an ordinary life thus far, not really having any great desires for adventure or wanderlust to travel the solar system or the universe, but now he is, and he just kind of has to deal with that. And it's pun after pun, it's joke after joke. It's hilarious situation after hilarious situation, and Arthur Dent's slightly like baffled, unwilling perspective as lead character through it all is what really just like adds to the whole atmosphere, and it's such great fun. It's a classic, and it's one that I think is a classic for a reason, so if you haven't checked it out yet, please do. Speaking of classics, the next book I want to mention was Northanger Abbey by Jane Austen. I always find there to be something quite comforting about a Jane Austen book, but in moments they can also be quite tragic, so I think Northanger Abbey is particularly apt for this video because it is more of like a sort of parody satire novel. It plays on the tropes of the Gothic novel that was particularly popular in Jane Austen's time and a little bit earlier. So our protagonist in Northanger Abbey in Regency, England, is basically a Gothic novel fangirl, and because of all of these Gothic novels she's consumed, she's constantly expecting danger and mystery around every corner. It slightly like blinkers her perspective of what is sort of like normal in society. She keeps expecting dramatic things to happen, she wants a bit of an adventure, and it can sort of lead her to take things too far or overlook what might actually just be like a really lovely opportunity, and leads her into a little bit of trouble with a man who is a potential suitor. Of course, throughout the course of the novel she learns to appreciate real life over fiction perhaps, but she still brings this like bubbly, enthusiastic, adventurous spirit to everything that she does, and that's really wonderful in itself. And it's just like a really engaging, wonderfully written novel, and also not one of Jane Austen's longer books if you're looking for somewhere to start with. It was the first book I read by her, and I found it a really engaging introduction. If you are looking for something that might be a little bit of a quicker read, I want to mention a comic book series, and that is Moonstruck. So at the moment I believe only volumes 1 and 2 have been released. They're the only two I've had my hands on. Do you know what? I'm not even sure if there's more comic books after volume 2. I hope there are, because I really enjoy this series. But it's well worth checking out. It's basically set in a world a lot like our own. We follow a bunch of college students heading off to their lessons every day, meeting up in coffee shops to meet their friends, write their novels, going to parties in the evenings, and potentially starting budding relationships. However, all of these characters are magical creatures. So we do have humans in this world, but they are not really the focus. Our central characters are a centaur, a couple of werewolves, a seer, a minotaur, and many others. It also has incredible LGBTQ plus representation, including diverse relationship and sexuality representation, as well as diverse gender identity representation, and characters from a lot of different like ethnicities. So it just really nails it on the head for representation, which is really wonderful reading it, because it just feels like a much better representation of society. But overall the tone is light-hearted and cheerful. The illustrations are so adorably cute, and all of the characters are just exactly the kind of people that you want to be friends with. Their friendships and romantic relationships are full of communication and support, and it's so lovely to see. A book I have talked about a lot since I read it, but for good reason I feel, is The Queen of Solaria by Effie Calvin. This is the first in a currently 4-book series, and I love all the books in the series, although I think, is book 2 my favourite? I don't know how to pick. They're all brilliant. Like, this is just a brilliant series that I don't know how it does it, but always puts a smile on my face, and all the people I've recommended it to that have since told me they've read it said it did exactly the same thing for them in a really unexpected way. They're quite short novels as well, so they're really packing a punch in those few pages. In The Queen of Solaria, we follow 2 princesses who have unexpectedly become betrothed to one another to create an alliance between their kingdoms. So the original plan was for the princess travelling to the kingdom that this book is set in to marry the prince, but the prince has recently died in a dragon attack, and therefore they need to find a new way to ally their kingdoms. And this is this wonderful world where all sexualities and gender identities are accepted. There are characters with all different relationship preferences, and because of that it's completely normal for like an engaged marriage to be between 2 women, as it is for an arranged marriage to be between a man and a woman. So we have this new betrothal between the 2 princesses who weren't expecting to marry one another, so they also are getting to know one another and trying to figure out whether they can make this work, whether one of the princesses feels she can take on the responsibility that this would mean for her, and the other one trying to figure out if she can adjust to a different fiance than what she was expecting. And throughout the series there's a focus on female-female relationships. We have a central couple in book 1, a new central couple in book 2, return to the original central couple in book 3, and a new central couple in book 4. So much wonderful female-female romance there if that's what you're into. A really intriguing magical world, which like I said has great LGBTQ plus representation, but equally a fascinating like political, fantastical and religious backdrop. Like, the religious system is so intricate and plays a large role in how this world works. It definitely gives me sort of like Greek myth vibes, but any, I suppose, like polytheistic religious vibes. That's just like my frame of reference. And gods actually play quite an active role in the storyline, so this is one that I continuously recommend. It felt perfect for this video, so I'm recommending it again. Now my next 2 books are actually by the same author, but it was too difficult to pick, and that is of course Terry Pratchett. So I've decided to go for a YA book by Terry Pratchett and an adult book by Terry Pratchett. So depending on what your preferences are, there's a recommendation there for you, because there's a Terry Pratchett book for everyone. I mean, okay, he's maybe not going to be it for everybody, but I think he's always worth giving a shot, regardless of what kind of reader you are, because his books are hilarious and amazing and magical and imaginative, and I love them. But both of the books I'm going to mention are set on his Discworld, which was a world he created in order to set lots of different stories. So we have series within the Discworld, and both of the books I'm going to recommend are the first in their own series, so you can start with them. The YA option is The Wee Free Men, and this is the first in the Tiffany Aching series. The title comes from a group of central characters in this book called the Wee Free Men, who are Pixies, so not Pixies, Picts, as in like the ancient people of like North Scotland, who are these wild, carefree, outlandish fairies with red hair that live in clans with very important female chieftainesses, might I mention, that steal sheep and like to drink and have skin that is entirely blue from tattoo dye. And they're just straight up hilarious. They end up assisting our young, newly discovered witch, Tiffany Aching, in rescuing her brother from the world of the Fae, where he has been taken by the Fairy Queen. And Tiffany Aching is just an excellent protagonist in herself. It's so fun to follow her, like, story and her growth throughout the like following installments in this series, as well as her continued friendship with the Wee Free Men, and I just love these books. We then have, for my adult recommendation, The Weird Sisters. So continuing with the witch theme, this is about a coven of 3 witches and their involvement in some courtly drama. So this book very much draws on Shakespeare. So there is a lot of allusions to different Shakespeare plays and the outlandish plot lines of Shakespeare plays, and kind of like twisting them on their head, which is really fun if you're like big into your Shakespeare. I've read a bit of Shakespeare, I'm no expert by any means, but that's like an added layer of hilarity, I'm sure, if you are. But you don't need to be like super into Shakespeare to still enjoy these books. But in general, I always find the witches' characters, whenever they crop up in any of Terry Pratchett's books and throughout their own series, some of my absolute favourite. They all have their own very strong, quirky characters, and their interactions are just brilliant, so I always recommend very highly this series to people looking to get into the Discworld. I think, again, this book just offers you the potential to roll on the floor in laughter, which sounds pretty good to me. So those are my 10 books that I think will put a smile on your face. They certainly did for me, and hopefully there's one here you haven't read yet that you might be able to check out. I would, of course, love to hear from you the books you have to recommend that might put a smile on mine or somebody else's face. They don't have to be straight up comedy books, but something upbeat, absorbing and heartwarming is all I'm looking for. Is that too much to ask? So do share your recommendations with me and everybody else, and until next time, happy reading. I will see you all again soon. Bye guys!